Thank you for attending another Open Cluster Management Community meeting. Today, we're going to talk about the ArgoCD integration with Open Cluster Management. But before we get to the integration piece, we're so excited to have Shobik to give us an overview of ArgoCD. He's a tech lead in the open source Kubernetes community around the areas of Helm, GitOps, ArgoCD, and many other projects as well. Shobik, without any further delay, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this meeting. Just to quickly call out some of my colleagues in this space. We have Jonathan West on the call, who's one of the approvers in the Argo community as well. So I'll quickly go over ArgoCD in general and give some contextual understanding of where that fits into the open cluster management space, or where the proposal fits in here. In general, ArgoCD is effectively a GitOps or CD tool that helps you ensure that your customize, your Helm, or your Kubernetes manifests, which may be stored in Git, are well synchronized with your cluster. And we have a bunch of APIs and tooling around it with an experience to make that nice and easy. In addition to that, we have a couple of things, which is we had some ecosystem projects which are becoming mainstream ArgoCD projects. You not only should be able to synchronize manifests from Git onto your cluster, which is the usual and very typical GitOps flow. You should also be able to define an API or define a custom resource where you would say, hey, this is what I want to be deployed in clusters. And how you get that information about clusters could be dynamic, which means I could potentially say I have a GitHub repo in this path which has customized manifests, and use function X to generate the list of clusters and put my applications in those clusters. That's effectively what application sets is. Jonathan, do you want to quickly add anything to that?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So application sets, it's a custom controller, contributes a new custom resource. You can see an example of that on the screen there. And it does exactly what Shubik said. It allows you to target a bunch of clusters. Say I've got this application defined within ArgoCD. I want to target that to a bunch of different clusters. I want to target what's known as a monorepo within the GitOps space. I want to target these, 5, 10, 20, 100 applications in this monorepo to a cluster. You can do those things using application sets. We make it very easy to keep a bunch of applications updated all within the ArgoCD ecosystem using the application set.
Yep. Thank you very much. So I think in general, if I had to summarize the whole ArgoCD piece for everyone on this call, it's effectively a tool which has a couple of CRs and a couple of controllers that ensures your manifests on Git are well synchronized with those that live on your cluster, and there's a story around a nice CR way of defining if they have to span more than one cluster. With that, I'll hand it back to Mike, or I'll be happy to take questions if you need more information on this.
Yes, I do have a question regarding the application set. So, as the GitHub page imply, currently the approach is app of apps. Can you talk a little bit about the app of apps and why application set is better going forward?
Right. I'll let Jonathan take that one.
Yeah, so app of apps was the traditional way to solve problems like this. And it works great for some scenarios. So if you're like a small development team that wants to deploy a set of applications, app of apps continues to work fine for that. But the ArgoCD folks recognize some of the issues with app of apps, with the app of apps pattern. And it was them that instigated and started the process creating application sets. The ArgoCD principals, Intuit and other folks that use ArgoCD and built ArgoCD they're the ones that started application sets. They recognized some of the issues with the traditional app of apps pattern and said, okay, well, we think that having a custom resource that more strictly defines the behavior of a set of applications would be beneficial to ArgoCD. In the design doc that's actually linked from the application set repo, they go into some of the details on why they did not feel that the app of apps pattern was as good as it could be. Some of the reasons they call out are if you are targeting a large number of clusters, so not like 1 or 2 or 5, but tens, hundreds of clusters, the app of apps pattern requires you to generate and template a whole bunch of different YAML files and keep all of those YAML files in sync, which is really difficult to do, and it really prevents you from needing to from having the ability to scale up to those large number of clusters or deploying a large number of applications to a large number of clusters. So that need for automation, that need to keep all of those tens or hundreds or even thousands of applications within an app of apps in sync is one problem area. Another problem area was kind of sync behavior, deletion behavior of the app of apps pattern, kind of inconsistent. It was counter to what folks that use the app of apps pattern had expected, and you'll even to this day you see questions on the ArgoCD Slack channel about folks that are using the app of apps pattern and are seeing behavior that they don't understand, and it's behavior that's working as expected or at least as designed, but it's definitely counter to what one would expect if one were coming to it, and that's kind of due to the nature of the pattern itself. Final issue with app of apps real quick was just there are kind of security issues with allowing non-cluster administrators to add applications to an app of apps pattern. So application administrators really need to be careful in accepting changes to app of apps folders from developers, because there are some privileged fields in there that if mismanaged would give teams access to clusters or to Git repos that they shouldn't have access. So that's the long answer. The short answer is a lot of automation is required with app of apps, which is not required with application sets. The sync behavior and deletion behavior is better with application sets, and you don't have those security issues that I talked about with applications.
Thank you very much. I see a few folks from IBM that are interested in the call right now, are interested in the ArgoCD and Open Cluster Management integration. So if they were to get started on this journey, what do you recommend them to do? Do you recommend start with the apps of apps or go straight to the application set? Because as the repo implied, this is not particularly tied to a release. So it seems like it's a more on the alpha stage. So when can we expect application set to be more like an official release, so to speak?
Yeah, I can probably go with that. So I think in general, we wanted to have the application set incubate separately to ensure it can be iterated on faster than the rest of ArgoCD, because it needed quicker innovation to get to a state where people would be using it. We heard in the community that people are actually using application sets in separate production systems already, and which is why there was a strong push to actually bring it out of alpha, not from an API per se, but from a stability perspective into a more mainstream ArgoCD. So there is an issue open, if you see by me on the application, on the ArgoCD side itself, to actually bring this into ArgoCD mainstream, and Jonathan has been leading that effort on it. In general, in the upcoming release of ArgoCD, that's 2.0, application sets would be shipped along with ArgoCD as an add-on, and then in a couple of releases from there, it wouldn't be called an add-on anymore in all probability. So this is out of this alpha stage at this point as we speak. So yeah, there is a reasonable expectation of stability that we are going to provide now onwards.
Thank you for that answer. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly Are there any other questions for specifically the ArgoCD folks? I see the chat. Oh.
I'd like to quickly add before we go into this. I think just want to make sure we kind of convey this properly. So the stuff that you're going to see now is kind of proposed between some of the discussions that Joshua and I have been having. This is yet to go through conversations in the ArgoCD community with wider folks. So just wanted to add that note. This still will go through a lot of discussion, but I think to me personally, this design, I think that will probably be going through looks okay to me. But then we'll still need to discuss further. So this is not committed work. Just want to mention that, but this is something that we want to work towards, and I'm positive that great things will happen with this.
All right, thank you for that notes. Yes, as Shobik implied, this is a work in progress. But these are some of the use cases that we can probably already support right now for someone to start playing with. And I'm just about to go over 3 of the use cases that we discussed, and I'm sharing them with the communities. So the first use case is, a service integrator want to manage all the application from a single point, which in the open cluster management side, we call it the hub. And then so we have a single instance of ArgoCD deploy on the hub, and then the apps are actually applied on the hub side of ArgoCD, and then using the managed cluster API to push it down to the managed clusters. So that's one of the pieces that relies on the cluster lifecycle piece to be open source. And once that piece is open source, we can get more details about it. The second use case is similar to the first one. We still an admin service.
Just a quick question, Mike. Sorry to jump in there. All of the cluster management parts that are referenced here are already sourced. So there was a comment about waiting for it to be open source, but the pieces from OCM for cluster lifecycle, I just want to make sure that that's clear that those parts are already open sourced.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. To continue on the second use case, so it's similar to the first use case. It's still a service integrator or admin that wants to deploy application quickly from a single point and manage them. So this is actually the use case that I'll be demonstrating. So in this case, the ArgoCD is deployed onto each managed clusters, and then they're all watching a single point of GitHub, so that the application can be delivered into all these managed clusters and still managed on the hub side easily. So again, I'm going to demonstrate this use case later. So in this use case, there are many ways that open cluster management can push the ArgoCD apps down to the managed clusters. I'm about to show using the subscription way, but there are policy. There's also a policy way of doing this, and using the policies, I show the status of hey, what is violated and what's not. But again, before we show that example, we're going to demonstrate the policy side of the open cluster management first in our next meeting or so, and before we get to that example. So in the third use case, this is really interesting use case brought up by Andrew Block. This enable ArgoCD as a service for application development team. So again, ArgoCD is in charge of distributing the apps, and each application development team will have their own ArgoCD in their namespace. So it's they're watching the GitHub on their own, so they can work with their GitOps operation on their own clusters and their own namespace. Again, I want in the diagram I show here, they all have the ArgoCD installed on the hub, but it's optional. In these two use cases, because the ArgoCD is already installed on the managed cluster side. So if you want, you can use the subscription model to push down the ArgoCD or policy to push down the ArgoCD and not have the ArgoCD on the side if you choose. So I'm gonna give a demo on the use case, on this use case. So again, I have 3 kind clusters set up that imitate on the left side the hub clusters. And on the right side, I have a managed cluster 1 and a managed cluster 2. And I already have a application subscription that deploy the ArgoCD application down to the managed clusters. So that's the setup that I have now. And then in this case, I'm gonna apply a subscription that watches the Argo config on this repo, and it's just a really simple application. I didn't use the application set yet, but in this case, we're watching a ingress deployment from this GitHub. So it's just a few easy deployments. So when I apply this subscription, so I should see the application. So I should see the application config subscription that I just deploy on the hub, propagate it down to the managed clusters, and then if we see the ArgoCD application, and it's now in the process of getting synced. So if we go over to one of the managed clusters UI side, we can see that the this example application is in the process of deployment. So that's a general idea, as Shobik and Michael implies, and Josh. This is up in flight of changing, but that's the general idea of what we're doing with the integration work between ArgoCD and the open cluster management side. I want to piggyback on the application set. We have some proposal. Joshua placed some enhancement proposal, so we can leverage the cluster generator to do the placement part easier. Is Josh on the call? Josh, do you want? I'm
Yes.
sorry to put you on the spot. Do you want to quickly talk a little bit about the enhancement proposal that you written?
Absolutely. I don't mind, and I don't mind being put on the spot. So pretty much what we did was, or what was done is a submission for enhancement was made for the application sets against the application sets repo to extend the generator. They have I know we didn't really get into the details of it, but they have a concept here of the generator, which is the list of clusters that you want to target. And so a simple extension of this would be to accept third-party resources to provide that list. And so not specifically OCM's placement, but any resource that you created with a defined status. And so what that does, though, is once we get that approved and we get the integration in where we can use a third-party kind to produce the list, we would take advantage, and thank you, Mike, for bringing it up, we'd be able to take advantage of that with our placement algorithm as an example. So leveraging the in-place imported or provisioned clusters that OCM has under management, use those as targeting for the application sets. And so it just helps to expand on top of, so there you see Mike was highlighting the decision section. So picking a cluster. This would just bring additional placement capabilities, such as we have with the new foundation placement rule, such as there's tolerances, there's different types of predicate creations as well. And then there's going to be some additional pieces brought on with availability and performance metrics, I assume, at a certain point.
Thank you, Josh, for that. And sorry for putting you on the spot again.
It's okay.
Are there any other questions for the Open Cluster Management community as well as the ArgoCD community?
So yeah, I have a question. So I think currently for the application set in ArgoCD, it's basically the push mode that that push the applications to each API server of the managed cluster. So is there any plan or is there any plan in the ArgoCD that they will also support the pull model, that you have something like an agent on the managed cluster to fetch?
So maybe I'll comment unless Shuvik, if you wanted to
Go
add
ahead,
on.
Josh.
Maybe let me go first and then you can add
Yeah.
to it. I guess you can, with Argo today, you can actually create that type of format. As Mike was talking about the stuff that Andrew built, you can put an Argo CD installation on each of the managed clusters, in which case the Argo CD on that managed cluster is acting in a pull scenario. This is actually one of the extensions that we haven't submitted anything yet, but we are talking about the ideas internally is around using an application set in a centralized location to drive Argos in that type of scenario, similar to how the app sub works today. So I guess the straight answer is the default is that we were talking about in the core case here is what Mike brought up, the hub towards the endpoint, but then which is that one he's got on the screen. But you could do the secondary one, which is, if you want to go back that slide, this one gives you that more of a pull format where there's an Argo in each of the managed clusters, so each cluster is able to pull individually from the Git repo or the Helm repository, etc.
Right. I think that makes sense. I'll probably add a couple of lines to that, but you did a great job, Joshua. In general, when you create an application CR, you specify which cluster the manifests would go to. So you could sit in cluster A, have an application CR in cluster A, and specify that your manifests would go to cluster B, and in that case, your cluster A acts as the controller for stuff in cluster B, but you could potentially have that application CR created in cluster B itself and say, hey, I want to deploy this on Kubernetes Service Local, which means where I'm sitting. And in that case, the expectation would be that cluster where you put the application CR in would also have an Argo CD, precisely what Joshua mentioned. So both models would work, I would say.
Kujan, I think it was Kujan. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so sorry, but so in a better way, does that mean that if we don't, we have to have the Argo CD in each managed cluster, or for example, if we have a subscription already in the managed cluster that help to deploy the manifest, we don't really need to install the Argo CDs on the managed cluster.
Yeah, there's definitely different use cases and different flows. A lot of the time when you have, Mike, if you want to go to slide 3, when you have this, it's also that, or slide 4, I guess they're similar. You've got it's scenarios where development is using that individual Argo and connecting directly to it to do their work on the pieces so that they can, as Mike highlighted there, keeping the development work independent as well. But there is, as you point out, there is overlap in these, and it's going to depend a little bit on the use case.
Thank you, Josh. Are there any other questions? If not, thank you so much, Shobik and Josh, for backing me up on this presentation. I'm going to stop the recording now.